Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After we run you through the news you need to know about, we're going to be talking draft and specifically the tackles in this draft because the Dolphins need one desperately. I've been rewatching a lot of Dolphins games last year and the tackle position is a must need. So they needed to get one. We're going to talk about that after we talk about the news you need to know about. And after we talk about that, we're going to go into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. So if you like that, hopefully you'll stick around. I want to say this really quick before we get into the news. Please support my all-time Dolphins team, my wine bottle team that I assembled, where I assembled the all-time team. Part 1 is up there on my YouTube channel now, where we just go through the best offensive years and players and assemble them all in one team. So if you could just click it, give it a like, it helps out a lot. I really want to get a good return on some of these videos, because if I do, I'm going to do a full 7-round mock draft, but you know, if I don't get good returns on these videos, then there's no reason to really make them. I will just make the podcast videos. So please support those, guys. If you've been around the channel, it means a lot. And let's get into the news you need to know about. A lot of interesting stuff. We only got 3 news stories. So not a lot, but definitely some interesting stuff here. So this first one comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins prefer Herbert over Tua? Question mark. Speaking of the Dolphins, if they aren't able to pull off a shocking trade-up for Burrow, their situation is pretty up in the air. Although, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. Although there has been a ton of talk over the last year linking the Dolphins to Tua, multiple sources told Miller that the team isn't convinced Tua is their best option. And Miami has a lot of Justin Herbert fans in their draft room. So this is something that's come up a lot, and it's not true. So today, coincidentally, I was watching NBC, it was NBC Sports, and obviously they have their Pro Football Talk show that they do on there, and there was a report that they were reporting on that the Dolphins are still going to go with Tua, and that was today. I'll be recording this video, and that the article that we just read is a few days old. So there's a lot of contradictions out there. I've heard even Jeff Darlington. There was a report on ESPN about a week ago that he said that the Dolphins are still on Tua. If they can't get Burrow, their next option is Tua. Is exactly what the report was on ESPN. You guys can look up the video. Before that, days before that, the report came out about Herbert. Obviously, Pro Football Rumors is re-reporting on that, and that was from ESPN. So there's a lot of lies out there, clearly, about what the Dolphins want to do. Who knows if the Burrow thing is a lie? Who knows if the Tua thing is a lie? Who knows if the Herbert thing is a lie? I mean, those are the 3 biggest, those are like the 3 pillars of the Dolphins draft rumors right now. And it baffles me that these, if these are smoke screens, which one of them has to be, 2 of them have to be, what is the purpose of it? It really is confusing me. Because I don't understand from the Dolphins' perspective what any of this you gain from. Because say you're lying about Tua, I guess the only thing you can gain from the Tua thing is maybe the Chargers don't trade up if they love Tua. Even then, it's unlikely. So the smoke screens are weird. Maybe it just kind of throws people off the scent how desperate they are to trade up. Maybe that's the goal here. I really don't know. But if you zoom out from the Dolphin smoke screens and you look at the league as a whole and some of the reports that we've heard, I think the Tua thing is real. I think that there are a lot of Tua smoke screens. I think Tua is still going to go in the top 5, whether it's the Dolphins or not. And I think the whole thing about Tua falling is I think it's a smoke screen. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. I think Tua will go in the top 5. We just heard Rex Ryan, I don't know why I said it like that. Rex Ryan, if I could talk, Rex Ryan said a few days ago that Tua, to him, is the second best quarterback in this draft. And those are some of the things that he's heard from league sources as well. So there's a lot of confusing messages and mixed messages here from different sources. Who knows who's being fed bad information? I mean, obviously, a lot of the time, it's most people. People just like to say things on national television because, I got a scoop, and it's not really a scoop. It's just something an organization wants you to say on TV. That happens all the time. So I don't know. Again, who knows what any of this means? I brought up something a few podcasts ago that when you look at some of the Dolphins' recent drafts and what leaks have come to be true, most of them were 99% dead on. And that's not even the same regimes, by the way. Like, different GMs, like if Dennis Hickey to Mike Tannenbaum, especially Mike Tannenbaum, people were pretty much, the leaks that came out, like, it was always like a few days or a week before the draft. For example, this last draft when we took Christian Wilkins, 4 days before the draft, I think Omar Kelly tweeted it or reported about it, that the Dolphins want Christian Wilkins. What happened? The Dolphins took Christian Wilkins. So I don't necessarily think the organization is good at keeping a secret either. So it's just an interesting hodgepodge of information that I really don't know what to do with. And I don't know what to think about it. Because a lot of it contradicts itself. A lot of it doesn't make sense. And a lot of it's just straight up lies. So I don't know what to think about it. The thing I could say to you guys is most of this stuff isn't true. And it actually is a good feeling as a Dolphins fan because of the predictability of some of our drafts. This one actually feels nice where it's like, I don't think anybody knows what we're going to do. And I like that. I like that no one really knows what we're going to do. I think that's what the good thing we can take away from this is no one really knows. And that's just a good contrast between what we've had before where it's like, yeah, everybody in the league probably. Like, the fact that beat writers were able to predict our pick days before the draft is not a good sign. So I'm happy with this. And it does make me feel a little bit better about just at least, like, the shroud of I don't know what I want to say here. Just the mystery surrounding what the Dolphins are going to do, I think is going to benefit them. All right, let's move on to the next news story. This is a weird one that I don't think people think is something that we're ever going to talk about. We're going to talk about it right now. This next one comes from Pro Football Rumors. FIU quarterback James Morgan is drawing interest from the Packers, Bears, Colts, Raiders, Patriots, Bills, Jets, and Dolphins. So if you're not familiar with James Morgan, look him up. He's a small school guy, obviously. He's 6'4". He ran a 4.8 40. He's got a, strong arm, I would say. I don't think it's, like, huge. It's not, like, a ridiculous arm. He says that he could, compares his game or tries to model his game after Brett Favre. Watching the little that I have of James Morgan, he's nothing like Brett Favre. I don't think he has nowhere near the arm strength that Brett had, and he's nowhere near the athlete that Brett was. And I don't think he can create like Brett could. So he's nothing like Brett. He reminds me of a more athletic Joe Flacco, to compare him to someone. So if that's what you like, then there you go. And I haven't watched a ton of him. I've watched a very, very small amount. But from the little that I've seen, he doesn't remind me anything of that kind of a quarterback. And he reminds me, like I said, more of like an athletic Joe Flacco, in my opinion. So I'm not too big on James Morgan, if I had to say anything about him. So yeah, so he's drawing interest from the Dolphins, Patriots, Packers, Bears, Giants, Jets, Raiders, Colts. Pretty much the entire league is interested in James Morgan. So there's your story. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. This is the best one of the day. Dolphins linebacker Vince Veagle signs his restricted free agent tender. The restricted free agent linebacker signed his deal with the Dolphins today. Veagle will earn around $2 million next season. He's only 26 years old. He had 2.5 sacks, 59 tackles, and 1 interception in 15 games and 10 starts with the Dolphins. And remember, he was traded after training camp and preseason, or was it in the middle of preseason? I can't remember. But he didn't even have a training camp or full offseason with the team. So that's actually pretty impressive. He didn't know what the heck was going on for most of the part. Granted, he would have started every single game if he was on the team week 1. But since the trade was so sudden, he only started 10 out of the 15. But clearly was our best front seven, I guess he's considered a linebacker. But he was our best pass rusher. I would say Sam McGuavin and Vince Veagle were our best pass rushers. Yes, Sam McGuavin, because when we blitzed Sam McGuavin, we actually The few times that we did, he either sacked the quarterback or got a quick pressure. And Vince Biegel, he was good against the run. He was good against. He was a decent pass rusher. He was a smart linebacker. He's just a really good rotational player. He's a good starter. And I like that we're going to keep him around because he's only 26 years old, and I'm excited to see what he does with a more talented defense around him because I think he's going to shine even more because he doesn't have to be the centerpiece of a defense, especially one on the defensive front where he was the only real guy on the defensive line, whether we were in a 4-3 or 3-4, that could actually do something to the opposing quarterback, either make him feel uncomfortable or, get pressure or, set the edge of the run game. He was the only one consistently that we could really rely on for 3 downs to do that. And I'm excited that he's earned a spot on this team. I'm excited for him to come back, and I'm excited to see what he can do on a more talented defensive front. Now that he's either going to be in the he's definitely going to be in the rotation. I don't know how he might, depending on how the depth chart shakes out, which I'm excited to see, and how the draft goes. He might start. I would say it's likely he's a more rotational guy, more situational, if I had to bet. But again, I'm very excited to see what he can do on a defense that's much improved from last year. And like I said, I think he can shine even more. And I'm not even high on Vince Biegel. I don't think he's someone it's like, oh, this guy's he's our Chase Young or Joey. But he's not that. He's a good starter in the NFL. He's like a Rob Ninkovich. He's not insane. He's not going to take over games, but he can make 1 or 2 plays a game that could change the outcome, or just help your team win. I don't think, and they're not like sack fumbles, but they're, he blew up a run here, or he got a pressure here, he hit the quarterback here, stuff like that. He's not Khalil Mack, but he's a playmaker, and he's a good starter in this league. He's not I would say a Pro Bowl caliber player, but he's a good starter. So I'm not high on Vince Biegel. He could get even better with a better defense around him. So I'm excited to see that. And I'm glad the Dolphins were able to get him back. And he's the only real, out of everybody on the defensive line, I'm trying to think here. Out of everybody on the defensive line, he's got to be, he's definitely was the most consistent. And he's the only one I would really be comfortable with playing any meaningful minutes in a game coming back for the 2020 season. I think that's undoubtedly true. I don't Taco Charlton, or it's like, yeah, I really want Taco out here on 3rd down. It's like, no. Or Trent Harris, even though he played pretty decent at the last 3 games of the year. But at least I feel comfortable with him being out there. I'm like, okay, Vince isn't a slouch. Vince is a good player, So that's how I feel about Vince. So yeah, that's all the news you need to know about. You got some James Morgan and some speculation is basically the entire news you need to know about segment of the show this week. So yeah, it's not great. But hopefully the fan Q&A will spark some things. And right now we're going to talk about the draft. So the first thing I want to talk about is Tua really quickly. I'm about to say some things that might make some people upset, but I don't care. Tua Tagovailoa, and I've almost seen every single snap he took at Alabama, and that is not a joke. I've been watching literally every single snap he's taken. I'm almost done with the 2018 season, and I've seriously almost seen every single snap he's taken, and I'm like 10 minutes away from seeing every single snap. And the one thing that I love, or one thing I took away from all of, everything that I've seen from him, the number one thing I've taken away from him is the best ability that Tua has, that I think is, or one of my favorites, I should say, probably my favorite ability that he has that no one talks about, is his ability to manipulate the back end of a defense. I have never seen someone pump fake and the shoulder shrug move so much since Peyton Manning. It's insane. If you just watch Tua, the way he manipulates, if it's single high or whatever the defense is playing, the way he can manipulate safeties is insane. That's one of his best qualities. His shoulder shake is Drew Brees, Peyton Manning-esque, and I haven't seen it like that since those two. It's just the subtle things that he does that it's not something you see out of a college quarterback, especially out of some of the last guys. I haven't seen that out of a prospect that's come out in the draft in the last, like, I can't remember one, and recently, like, that's come out that's a high, like, oh, like Sam Darnold, like a high graded pick. I just can't remember one with that kind of a quality. I know it's a little weird, I guess, to bring up, but that's just something you don't see from college quarterbacks. Is that's baked into their game like that. It's just cool. Like, you know, some quarterbacks have this innate ability to, and he has it too. He also has that ability to just make a play. Like Josh Allen. I think he ran like a 4.7 40. When you watch him play, he looks like Cam Newton sometimes. And it's like, I don't understand how this guy's outrunning you right now. It's just, it's kind of, he just has that special thing about him where, like, again, like, it's just not something you see from a college quarterback, that he just has that. I just think it's very interesting. And I haven't seen that in a long time. It's just the subtle pump fake that he does. And it really it accentuates his ability to scan the field, which not a lot of quarterbacks have. And whether you credit the offensive line for that, because he did have a good offensive line in college, but his ability to manipulate the back end of a defense, and he's got really good vision where he does go through his reads, are some of the things that, like, he'll go 1 through 4 in a second. And that's something Peyton Manning was really good at as well. And that's something you really rarely see from mobile quarterbacks. Now, Tua is not, like, I would say, an insane athlete. Like, he's a very good athlete, I would say. But he's nothing special. But his ability to still have that in his game when he still can run at the college level, this is someone who's not been in an NFL game yet, is something to talk about. And I just thought that was interesting about his game. And I really like Tua, so, you know, I know, like, a lot of people don't like him, or at least, not a lot of people, but Dolphins fans and people around the national media need to calm down on some of the criticisms, and that's a whole nother 20 minutes that I could go and rant on Tua. I think the biggest problem with Tua is his injury history, and I think that's by far the worst of his qualities. So I want to talk about the tackles before we get into the fan Q&A, because it's something that I'm passionate about, is the big fellows on the outside. Because if you think about the last 15 years, not 15 because of Jake Long, we haven't had a consistent, okay, we'll say the last 6 years. The last 6 years of Dolphins football have been very inconsistent at the tackle position. Even when Laramie Tunsil finally was consistent, but people remember, like, he would miss 2 or 3 or 4 games, and his first, like, 2 years of the league, his play wasn't as consistent as it was in 2018. Like, that was peak Tunsil in Miami, was probably 2018. So we really haven't had someone there in a long time, and we need it. This offensive line needs it desperately. I watched a lot of Josh Rosen over the week, and one of the things that now, there's a lot of things that Josh Rosen needs to work on, but one of the things I came away with when I was watching Josh Rosen, and even when you watch Fitz, a great example is against the Giants, the tackles are bad. Like, they're really bad. And that's one of the things that and that's one of the big reasons Ryan Fitzpatrick won MVP. It's like, how did Ryan Fitzpatrick keep that game close in Buffalo? Because our tackles are awful. And that is something that desperately needs to be fixed. There's no depth there, number one. Julian Davenport was basically a throw-in. I don't remember if he was in the trade or not. I think he was. He's not the answer. Flowers is a better guard than he is a tackle. I don't think he's playing tackle. And when you hear people like Joe Thomas say, this is one of the best tackle drafts I've seen, it makes you take notice. And I think that the Dolphins should, if they take a quarterback, should take 2 tackles in the first round. And I'm serious about that. So I wanted to talk about some of the tackles that the Dolphins could target. And you look at 18, and then you get a later round pick, or later first round pick in the first round. You have an opportunity there to either trade up after 18 to get you another one, or you could just stay pat and get 2 pretty solid ones. 2 pretty good ones. So I want to highlight some of the later round guys that could get picked. So here are some of my favorite later round guys. I am a huge Andrew Thomas guy. I like Andrew Thomas. He's a good player. He's 6'5", 315. He was an SEC player, obviously at Georgia. He had to block some really good defensive linemen in his career there at Georgia. And I just like him a lot. I think he's a good player. But, if he somehow doesn't work out at tackle, which I think he will, I think he could be a versatile player that you could plug him in at guard, and he could play very well there. He's a physical big dude. And I just like Andrew Thomas a lot. And I think he could be a starter for us almost immediately. And if he's there at, what is it, 26, the 26th pick that we have, I could have that wrong. Because there's the projections of these tackles is all over the place. Some people going in the top 10. Some people have them dropping all the way down to 18. So I feel like Andrew Thomas is someone that we could get with our last first round pick. And I would be very happy with that. I like him a lot. And I think the Dolphins would be in good hands with that pick. So I'm going to look up our picks real quick because I know it's an obvious thing and I just don't want to be wrong. Just let me look really quick. I apologize, everybody. So, yeah, 26. So, yeah. I like Andrew Thomas. I think he's going to be a good player. And I would be happy if the Dolphins took him with the 26th pick. And again, projections of these guys are all over the place. A lot of people have Andrew in the top 5, but lower in the top 5, like 4 to 5, somewhere in there, if you look at rankings of tackles. The second guy that I like that you could take at, maybe you could trade up from 18. I like Willis a lot. Jedrick Willis from Alabama. And again, I've watched a lot of Alabama over the last week, and obviously he's on that team, so you notice him. He's a really good player, and I like him a lot. A lot. And if there was any way the Dolphins could get even in range of him, which they won't at 18, I would love that pick. And in some dream scenario where the Dolphins got their quarterback, you can plug in whoever the heck you want there, because I know it's super personal preference on that, and everybody disagrees. My dream first round would be either if we got Andrew Thomas and Willis in the first round, I'd be all over the moon. Now, there are other better players that you could, I guess, wish for, like Mekhi Becton out of Louisville, Worfs, or however you say his name, from Iowa, the guy who jumped out of the pool that one time, and Josh Jones from Houston, who's another player that the Dolphins could eye at 26. A lot of people have us taking Austin Jackson at 26. I just like Andrew Thomas more than those players. I like, because of the conference he played in and the level that he played at, I like him better than a Josh Jones and an Austin Jackson. And Willis, I like a lot too. My two favorite tackles in this draft that are realistic for the Dolphins to get are Willis and Thomas. I like them a lot. And it would be awesome if the Dolphins got both of them. Two SEC tackles that were just really good at what they did and played high competition their entire career. So those are my two guys. I know some people wanted me to talk about offensive linemen, and so there you go. Those are my opinions on the top 6 to 5 or 6 to 1 tackles. I think my just favorites out of the 6, are Thomas and Willis. So. There you go. There's your few minutes on some tackles and quarterback there. And I also think one thing I want to bring up is, before we move on to the fan Q&A, is Tua's 2018 film. And I shouldn't say film, just watching him, because I don't want to sound like a scout, because I'm not. But, I'm just someone who likes the Dolphins. But watching him in 2018, one of the things I noticed is a lot of his criticisms for him in 2019. If you watch his 2018 games, he kind of blows those out of the water, in my opinion. Like, he can't throw with people in his face. That's not true. Watch 2018. They ran a ton of bootlegs, ton of play action, where he had people barreling down on him, especially in the Mississippi State game in 2018. People were all over him that entire game, and he was just fine. The Auburn game in 2018, the LSU game, which started out really slow and it was a sluggish game in 2018, he was able to kind of combat some of those things. And I just feel like a lot of those criticisms of him is he can't make tough throws. Everything was so easy for him at Alabama. In 2018, he made a lot of tough throws, and he got hit a lot in a lot of those SEC games and was just fine. So I just don't. I think some of those things in 2018 show you things differently, in my opinion. And in 2019 as well. I think the offensive line was better in 2019 though. But yeah, so that's what I just feel like some of those things aren't wrong. I just think the biggest thing with Tua is he takes way too many hits that he shouldn't take because of his heart. And hopefully when he gets to the NFL, it's something we know. It's like, hey, Tua, we don't need 4 extra yards here. Okay, we need you for 16 games. So I hope that gets like seared into his head, because he does take way too many hits. And the injury thing is a scary thing, but I'm just willing to take the chance. And again, I think the good argument for Dolphins fans is you have 2 other first-round picks, and there's some guys that could go fall to you in the second round, or you trade back up into the first, and you could take like a Jordan Love, or because one of them is going to fall. I really do believe that, whether it's Herbert or Love, and I think the Dolphins could have their shot at either one of the two, if they don't get their guy in the top 5. So there's a lot of flexibility there that the Dolphins could take advantage of, and I think they will. So yeah, there you go. Let's get into the fan Q&A, ladies and gentlemen, where we answer fans' questions. This first question comes from Beef. He says, do you think Reggie McKenzie, who used to be the general manager of the Raiders, is helping the Dolphins pick good players in the draft, especially the later rounds in the draft? Reggie had an interesting career in Oakland, because if you look at Reggie's career in Oakland, let me sip my coffee really quick. He had one really good draft, like really good. I think it was the 2014 draft where he nailed it. He got 2 cornerstones for his franchise. One would have won MVP if he didn't break his leg, and the other one, obviously, is one of the better linebacker / defensive ends of the last decade. Hence, he made the all-decade team. So, by far, his best work was in 2014. If you look at the rest of his drafts, it's like, okay, a lot of this is miss, more than hits. And early Reggie McKenzie, I think he had other people in his ear. Later Reggie McKenzie, I don't know what happened there. Obviously, John Gruden wanted more control, wanted the guy that he liked. I think that's why Reggie left. But if you look at what he was able to do in 2014, and a lot of his drafts aren't terrible, but it's mixed. It's a mixed bag more than anything. But if you look at his time in Green Bay, it's completely different. I mean, he was a part of building a lot of those great teams in Green Bay. He was in that front office, and so the guy, has a lot of success in his career. If you look at his entire career, and when I read this question, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Reggie McKenzie's in the front office. He's someone who can give you great input. He's got a lot of success in his career, and it does make me feel more comfortable that he's in the front office. So yeah, I think he definitely can help the organization have a good draft. This next question comes from Mark. Mark says, I know we signed Jordan Howard, but how do you see as Miami running backs in 2020? So who do you see as Miami's running backs in 2020? I know we signed Howard, and this comes from Mark. He says, I know we signed Jordan Howard. Who do you see as Miami's quarterbacks in 2020? I don't know why I kept saying how do I see. Who do I see as Miami Dolphins running backs? So if you look at the top 3 running backs in the draft, you have J.K. Dobbins, and you have Jonathan Taylor, and you have Swift. One of those guys is going to go to the second round. And to be honest with you, if one out of the 3 guys, if I had any one of those 3, I'm pretty happy about it. I like all 3 of them a lot. I love Jake. Dobbins is my favorite. Jonathan Taylor, I love him. Swift, I love him. So if you come out of the draft with one of those 3 and you got him in the second round, you deserve a hug, because that's a great pick. And if you keep all 3 of your first rounders, somehow you keep your second, so you get 2 out of 5, you don't have to give up any capital to move up, then that's a perfect draft in my opinion. I mean, it's very difficult to nitpick that. I think it's a good outcome. You get your quarterback, you get your 2 tackles, and you get a running back in the third. So who do I see the Dolphins having on the roster? Either one of those 3 I think are going to be on the roster. Which one is it? I don't know. I think all 3, one of them will follow the second, and whoever does, I think there's a good chance the Dolphins are aggressive enough to get that guy. All right, so moving on to the next one. That was a good question mark. This next question comes from JackPack18. He says, I feel like with 1 or 2 solid picks in this draft combined with the free agent additions and the standouts from last season, this defense can be elite. Yeah, it really depends on who the Dolphins pick there in the draft. Like, how many defensive players are they going to take? Excuse me. And all they really need is a free safety, and I think they could add some defensive end rotation there. But the secondary to me is the most important thing about this defense. It's how New England built their Super Bowl teams in their second run in the 2010s. So I think that's how this team, and especially we saw what they did in free agency. I mean, I did not expect Byron Jones to be a Dolphin. I thought they definitely would emphasize, and they did, front 7 more. I just didn't think they'd focus on a corner like they did, and they did. And I think that's just even more of a reason to think that they're going to build it like they did in New England, and again in their second Super Bowl runs. So I think they might go secondary more than they would defensive line to add some more rotation and depth there, maybe get a true free safety. So yeah, if they can get someone like that, I think this defense has a really good shot at being something special, because if you look at the matchups that this Dolphins team can present for an offense, it's pretty awesome. Like, we could take your best tight end away, because that's what Eric Rowe did all year last year when he was moved to safety. We got 2 shutdown corners on the outside, and we have athletic running backs that can match up with your running backs, or athletic linebackers that can match up with your running backs. So our matchups, because we play a lot of man-to-man defense, favors the defense that we play, and we really complemented our scheme with some of the additions that we made, and I'm very happy with that. So yeah, really, I think you could see maybe you see someone like a DT in terms of defensive line. Maybe you see like a nose tackle, or maybe a defensive end. Maybe AJ, what's his name? I can't remember his name. The guy out of Iowa, I really love a lot. Maybe a lot of people have him falling to the second because of his bad combine. Maybe they pick him up. So there's a lot of different things that they can do, but I would assume the Dolphins would focus on secondary and maybe another linebacker, which I don't know why they would do, but I heard a rumor that that's something that they might do. Yeah, but the defense already, I mean, if you look at the scheme and the personnel, it's got a chance to be pretty good. This next question comes from Ethan. He says, "Hey Skaggs, most of the wine bottle team I've seen moving Jake Long to right tackle, but who do you believe is Miami's best true right tackle in NFL history?" This is a great question, and I would have to say, I cannot remember his name, but he's someone that I considered on the list. I'm going to look this up really quick. So, hold on a second, guys. I'm so sorry. This is something that I researched a lot, just because I was like, who do I want at the other tackle position? And okay, so sorry guys for the pause. I'm going to have to go with Norm Evans, because he started on all of the 70 teams at tackle, and the 70s teams. And he's obviously a part of the perfect season. And so yeah, I'm going with Norm Evans. He had, I think he made like 91 consecutive starts. Something crazy like that. The reason he wouldn't be on the modern team is because in his era, they did not pass the football. He was basically a glorified guard. So that's why I went with more modern time tackles. All right, this next question comes from. So I would go Norm Evans as the best true tackle, right tackle in Dolphins history. This next question comes from Hunter. He says, what would your reaction be to us taking a tackle at 5? Pretty bad. I would be like, even though I love the idea of getting 2 in the first round, we got to get a quarterback with our top 5 pick. I would be more mad if we took a tackle at 5 than even more mad if we took Herbert. So that's how mad I would be. This next question comes from SM. SM says, all the hype for Joe Burrow over Tua reminds me of 15 years ago when the Finns were scared off from Drew Brees and rolled the dice on Dante Culpepper. I'd hate to give up half of our draft for Dante Culpepper. Thoughts? And his question comes from SM. So what are you saying? Oh, so you're saying Joe over Tua. I see what you're saying. I got that mixed up for some reason. I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna agree with you. Sorry, guys. I can't talk. I'm gonna agree with you, SM. I would rather take Tua and keep 2 first-round picks. That's just how I think about it. Now, if you're like, hey, you could pick Burrow or Tua, and this is just straight up, and I don't have to give anything up, I'm gonna pick Burrow. And the only reason I'm picking Burrow is because of the injury history. You could sleep better at night if you have Burrow on your team because of the injury history. So that's the only reason to me why you would want Burrow over Tua. And I'm not giving up 2 first-round picks. If the Dolphins do it, by the way, if they do it, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, the world is ending. Because at least we have Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? But I do think it's a better idea to just take Tua and get your 2 tackles in the first round, in my opinion. So I think you're right, Essen. I don't think I don't think Joe Burrow is going to be bad. I think he's going to be really good. This next question comes from Beef. He says, besides athleticism and a quarterback the Dolphins really need, which quarterback in the draft do you think has strong leadership capabilities in order to lead the Dolphins? So, who's the best leader? Okay, so Tua is a great leader because his teammates love him. So that's a great sign when your teammates love you. Here's the thing that I love about Tua in terms of intangibles that people talk about all the time. I love the fact that everybody loves him who plays for him, and I love the fact that he does not care what game it is. He acts the same. It doesn't affect him. He comes in as a backup in the national championship game. I think he was a freshman at the time, and he throws the game-winning touchdown. That says all you need to know about Tua and how much balls he has. So I love those 2 things about Tua in terms of intangibles. The thing I love about Joe Burrow, though, his charisma and his just every man mentality, this is of his personality, is really relatable, and how he's just a dude, and obviously his teammates love him as well. So those intangibles, I think both have those, and I think it's pretty much it's even when it comes to that the intangibles of both players. To answer your question, Beef. All right, this next question comes from Mark. Mark says, "What do you think? What do you think we should do at considering Tua? He says, "What do you think we should do at considering Tua? Seems to not be on Miami's board. I recall last year Adam Schefter breaking the story about Miami wanting to pursue a quarterback in 2020, possibly even 2021. The 3 choices were Fromm, Herbert, and Tua, and somehow." That turned into, Miami definitely wants Tua. So if they don't get him, who do you want? Herbert, Love, Eason, Hurts, Fromm, Gordon. So the guy that I want the most, and I've thought about this, and I've come all the way around on this. I apologize to everything that I said, because I think at one point I did say I kind of like Hurts better than Herbert, and I probably would go back in time and hit myself in the face. But I think if I can't get Burrow or Herbert, first of all, I will migrate in a small cave somewhere for a long time. But if I can't get those 2, then I will definitely pick Justin Herbert. I think the Wisconsin game really shuts me up in some of the things that I worry about him with, and I just think he's a better pick and a better player than the other guys. So, I will take Herbert. To answer your question mark. This next question comes from Ethan. He says, "Hey Skaggs, the media seems to be pushing the narrative that Miami will have to trade up in order to draft Tua. Am I crazy for thinking he will be there at pick number 5? No, I think he will be. I really do. If I had to, it's like, do you think Tua's gonna be there at 5? Yeah. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think it is crazy. I don't think the Dolphins will have to trade up. This next question comes from Bad Bandit. He says, the Jets are supposedly shopping Jamal Adams. I understand that the Jets are unlikely to trade a Pro Bowler to a division rival, but we have more to offer than most. Do you think the Dolphins will consider trading for him? I think they would trade him to us if we offered him a first. And if I'm a GM and I'm looking at our roster right now, I'm like, okay, I believe we have 2 first rounders in next year's draft. Is Jamal Adams worth one of those 2021 first round picks? Yes. So if I call the Jets, I'm like, do you want our 2021 first round pick for Jamal Adams? I'm 1000% making that call, but I think the 2020 draft, I'm not touching any of them. Like, I'm keeping both of them because I just really think we need to draft 2 tackles. That's just how that's how I'm thinking right now. Unless somehow the Dolphins get Trent Williams from the Redskins, they need 2 tackles. So that's what I'm going to do. So I think the 2020 picks are untouchable. I think the 2020, and especially since this is one of the best tackle drafts in a long time, those 2020 picks, in my opinion, you're not touching them because it's hard enough to get a tackle in this league. The fact that this is actually a deep draft for tackles and they're all pretty good players, there's no way I'm giving up one of those for Jamal Adams. So I'm going to address those team needs this year, and if you want a 2021 first for Jamal, then you can take it. And I think they would if we offered them a first-round pick. I think the division rival thing they'll overlook if we're the only ones offering one. This next question comes from Mark. He says, I feel like we have to trade up at least pick 3 for Tua, giving up our first-rounder in the trade. So with pick 18, if the better offensive linemen are gone, who do you take? Safety, Xavier McKinney of Alabama to bolster the back end of the defense? If not, who would you draft at 18? Oh man. If McKinney is there, I take McKinney. Or I call the Jets about, hey, do you want this pick for Jamal Adams? That's probably what I would do. This is the first thing I'm doing. Hey, do you guys want this pick for Jamal Adams? If all the tackles are gone, that's probably what I would do. If they were like, yeah, I'd be like, all right, thank you for one of the best safeties in the league. So yeah, I would probably call the Jets first because I think that Jamal Adams thing is true. They tried to get the Cowboys almost got him last year. So, so if I can't get Jamal Adams, I think it's a serious conversation. Do I take a Ruggs if he's there? Do I add a lot of speed to this offense? And I think if it was between Ruggs and McKinney, I'm going to go with Ruggs because his ability to affect the game in so many different ways is worth it. So I'm going to go with Ruggs. Not that we need a receiver that bad. Obviously we don't. But I think the speed that he adds to the offense in the special teams and on offense, some of the things that we could do with him, I just like McKinney a lot. Or not McKinney, Ruggs. So I would probably take Ruggs if he was there. So those are the 3 options. Here's my draft board. Jamal Adams is 1, Ruggs is 2, and 3 is McKinney. So if any of those possibilities happen, those are the 3 things that I would explore. This next question comes from Hunter. He says, so we have Byron and X. Where does Nick Needham fit in the slot? He played some slot during the season. So yeah, Nick Needham for sure is a slot guy. This next question comes from Logan. He says, do you think it would be wise to draft a running back in the late first as opposed to any other round, given that the first round pick are given a 5th-year option, but then they would be around 28 when they are a free agent and wouldn't demand a large contract, or we could move on. The shelf life for a running back is 6 years. Thoughts? It's depending on what kind of running back you take. If you're taking a Jonathan Taylor or J.K. Dobbins who's a grinder and you're going to hand the ball off a lot to, and you don't subscribe to the theory that 2 is better than 1 when it comes to running backs, then yeah, I think the shelf life is 6 to 7 years of prime of that player. But if you do subscribe to the change your, I work 2 running backs into an offense, I think the shelf life goes up even more. And if he's Darren Sproles type, the shelf life goes through the roof. So that kind of argument, it really depends on what happens and what kind of player you take. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a big thing I would factor in. Like, I'm not factoring shelf life if it's like at the bottom of the first. Is he a really good player? Let's say the shelf life for running back is 6 years. I'm getting a really good player for 6 years, so that's worth it. So yeah, I think that I don't think that matters too much if depending on the player you take. Like if you take Swift, like how long has Sproles been in the league? Like forever. So someone who's like that, who's more of like a smaller receiving back, change of pace type of a guy, shelf life for a player like that. And I feel like to prolong any running back's career, you have to get a second one. This whole thing where like, oh, let's ride him like a warhorse until his knees fall off, I think is stupid. I think, okay, we have a special player like a Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott. Let's prolong his career as much as we can, get the most out of his career that we can. So let's get him someone else who can come in behind him, because running backs, I mean, we've seen it. Like you can get a really good one in the 3rd or 4th round, and because they're just not wanted anymore for some reason. And I think you can prolong a running back's career anyway. Yeah, I don't think, I don't think you got to take one even in the late of the 1st round. I think you can either get one in the 2nd. If it gets too crazy, maybe you trade up in the 2nd to get one. So yeah, I think if you really want a running back and you're a Dolphins fan, you're going to get one. And I don't think it's a bad thing if you take one at the end of the 1st, for sure. This next question comes from Beef. He says, it makes sense for the Dolphins. I think maybe we answered this one already. No, we didn't. It makes sense. Okay, this comes from Beef. Excuse me. He says, it makes sense for the Dolphins to trade up because of how many picks we have and how much we have to pay for rookies. Would you have to make the trade before or on the draft day to get Tua or Burrow? We definitely have to move up to get Burrow. If we were to get Tua, do you think we still need to move up to get him, or do you think he'll fall to us? I think he's going to fall to us. I don't think the Dolphins need to move up. And the reason I say that is based on how everybody has stocked the shelves with quarterbacks. The Panthers are out of it, the quarterback conversation. The Chargers, I think, are out of the quarterback conversation because they're for sure starting Tyrod Taylor this year, which is crazy. But I don't think they're going to be like, okay, we got to trade up to, get one. I don't think they're going to give up. And I could be wrong, but I just don't think they have that kind of mentality. I think they're content with whoever. An article came out the other day, and it was saying that it was a report that the Chargers are content. And I can't remember where this came from, but there's something that I read. They said the Chargers are content with whoever if the Dolphins pick Tua, they're okay with Herbert. So I don't think they're going to be aggressive. Because remember, the Chargers have to give up stuff too. So I don't think the Chargers are like, all right, let's trade up. I think they're content with Tyrod, and I think they'll take one that they can put behind Tyrod and maybe start later. So I think for all of those reasons, I think Tua is going to fall to us. And I don't think we're going to have to trade up. And I don't think Oakland's going as far as, because they have to go even farther than we do. And I don't think that team, the only other team I think it would probably be Oakland. And so yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. So I think he'll follow us. This next question comes from Logan. He says, based on our front seven, he says, do you see a 4-3? I do, or a 3-4. It's a multiple front. It really depends on what team you're playing. So whatever we feel is the best front against whatever team or whatever look we're getting is the formation you're gonna get. They can do both when you look at the personnel, so it really doesn't matter. This next question comes from Beef. He says, do you see Brian Flores building an awesome defense like the Steel Curtain or the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens in the future? Okay, the difference between, unless you want to say X and Byron or your Lambert and Mean Joe Green or Ray Lewis, and I guess Ed Reed wasn't there at the time, but who else? I guess the Bears had Singletary and they had Dent. I guess you could make an argument that the Byron and X are talented enough that maybe one day they make. And could they be Hall of Famers? They would have to consistently do what they're doing now for the next how many every year. So I guess you could, like, okay, the cornerstones for this defense right now are the two corners. The cornerstones of the Ravens were, at the time, I guess, was it Ray? I guess you could say it was Saragusa and Ray Lewis, or was it, they really had one guy they're building around, which was Ray, at least for the foreseeable future. And I guess the steel curtain, it was a lot of different people. I mean, you had Blunt, Mean Joe Green, Lambert. You had a lot of guys on that defense. That's a defense we're not even going to compare, because that defense is insane. So in terms of talent. So I guess your cornerstones really right now are X and Byron, and those are two really talented guys. So I don't know and if you look at the Buccaneer or the what was it 2002 defense of the Bucs, they had Simeon Rice, they had Sapp, and they had Brooks. Those were their cornerstones. So I think maybe you need one more guy, but I think you can make. I mean, this defense is going to be really talented. I don't know if it's going to be an all-time great defense, but it's definitely going to be really talented. This next question comes from Beef. He says, if Cam Newton were to come to the Dolphins, how well do you think he'd fit in with Brian Flores' plan? This is a great question, because I feel like he carried a poorly run franchise for a long time. Ron Rivera got really lucky with Cam Newton, Luke Kuechly. Like, really lucky. If you look at what they did after they got those two, they never were aggressive. It's like, do you guys want to win a Super Bowl? You have two guys that could have made the All-Decade team if you played your cards right, and you failed to play your cards right. You had two generational talents at two very important positions, and you guys didn't win a ring. And it was because of how that team was managed and how it was ran, and it just underachieved. If you think about what the 2015 Panthers did, they knocked out one of the best teams of the decade, if not the most talented team of the decade, which was the Seahawks, in the playoffs. And they did it twice in 1 year. They beat them in Seattle, and then they beat them at Carolina, and they blew them out. They beat the best Cardinals team ever in terms of record, regular season record, and the trajectory and the talent of that team. I mean, there's not another Cardinals team that I would say, oh, that one's more talented than that one. And they destroyed them. Snapped their necks. And they could have made some trades. Like, let's say they get Odell, because they desperately needed a receiver. If you look at Cam Newton's best weapon on offense was Greg Olsen in 2015. Not one of their running backs rushed for over 1,000 yards that year. And Ted Ginn was his best receiver. They just never helped any. They never added to an already really good roster to get them over the hump. They just never did it, and they just stayed. They're like, all right, let's just roll with these guys, and it just didn't work. And their scheme sucked on offense. It was terrible. It was so basic. It's the old school. Hey, let's run on 2nd and 10. It's like, why are you doing that? You're putting your franchise quarterback in 3rd and long every game, and you're like, just make a play. And more times than not, he did. And then eventually, it almost ended Cam Newton's career because of how many shots he was taking. Not only was he in 3rd and 10 on a consistent basis, but his offensive line were mediocre to bad most of his career. So, I feel like Cam Newton has gotten a bad rap for some of the things his organization did to him and some of the play calling that he's had to deal with over his career at Carolina. And I think he has a chance to still be a really good player. And I feel like our offensive scheme and some of the players that we have in Miami right now with the two big receivers on the outside, I think all of those things would really work with him. So I think he fits Brian Flores' plan perfectly. I think he fits the offense in Chan Gailey's system. And I feel like the personnel is probably the best he's had in terms of a collective group. I mean, when he had Steve Smith was at the end of his career. He gave him 1,000-yard season, and he gave him a 700-yard season. So Steve Smith wasn't Steve Smith, and I just feel like if Cam Newton came to Miami, he would be going to a good situation. Let's move on. I spent way too long on that. So yeah, I think he fits his plan just fine. This next question comes from Tech Me Out. He says, hypothetical. If you had a chance to draft the current Josh Rosen, Jordan Love, or Justin Herbert, who do you take? I think you know where I'm going with this. Dang. Ooh. That's a tough one. I think Josh Rosen's upside is better than even Herbert's. And I know people, oh, Herbert can run. It's like, yeah, but I don't think, I mean, Josh Rosen can be a really good pocket passer. I'm going to go with Rosen. If you remember, I don't want to spend too long on this. Just as a quick thing I will say about Herbert. He did run a pro-style offense. Rosen did at UCLA, and both need development. Let's put it that way. So I think it's more even than maybe people even give it credit for. This next question comes from Richard. He says, I hope the Dolphins don't listen to the national sports media and trade up for Tua and waste our picks on a player with bad ankles and a bad hip. I'm praying some other team takes him, like Washington or Detroit. I think the Dolphins taking Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts or Jacob Eason or Jake Fromm within one of our... No. I'm off the Hurts bandwagon. After some of the stuff I've seen, I'm off of the Hurts wagon. When I compared him to Dak, that's a terrible comparison for a lot of different reasons, and I don't want to talk about that right now. I was just wrong. Jordan Love is a project and might not work. Eason is a pocket passer statue who reminds me of Ryan Mallett, which I don't like. He's tall and a big arm. Yeah, look at Brock Osweiler and Mallett. What two just great attributes. Jake Fromm is like pinning a poor man's Chad Pennington. So I just don't. I don't like those guys. I don't like them. I would rather have Cam Newton. And I would definitely rather have Herbert. I was wrong about that. This next question comes from SM. He says, I see Miami using the 26th pick in the first... to answer your question, Richard. This next question comes from SM. He says, I see Miami using their 26th pick in the first to move up 2 spots for Tua. So pick 3, it's Tua, and then I see them trading down 18 into the bottom of the first, giving us another second. So it would look like Tua, offensive tackle, 3 second-round picks. I hope to God. It's not a bad outcome, but it's not great. It's like, okay. I'm not terribly mad at that. But I think it's like a meh. The best outcome is the Dolphins not having to trade up to get Tua. And keeping their other 2 first-round picks. That's a great outcome. If that happens, I need all of you guys to... listen, okay, if you like Herbert, then imagine it's Herbert, and you don't have to give up any picks, okay? Just freak out, because that's such a good scenario, and such a good spot to be in. This next question, in my perspective, it's Tua. I know for some of you it's Herbert. So, but if I would be freaking out if we had to give anything up and we still got Tua. This question comes from Bad Bandit. He says, do you think it's possible the Dolphins trade up and grab a non-quarterback like Chase Young? No. They're taking a quarterback. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the Dolphins podcast. I love how it sounded like some generic radio host there. I had a great time. I hope you guys did too. And remember to support the channel in any way that you can. It means a lot. And again, support the other stuff that I do if you're interested in podcasts. We just did one on the best offense you can assemble for the Dolphins. So if you haven't, please go check that out. And if you don't even want to watch it, just give it a like. Just give it a little like. And if you're new, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. These release once a week. And I'm thinking about doing a 7-round mock draft. So if you want to stick around for that podcast, you can subscribe. It'll be coming out fairly soon. And I am Skaggs283. And again, we do a ton of Dolphins content. So if you're a Dolphins fan, we cover the team weekly. And if you're kind of starving for something like that, then hopefully you enjoyed this. So I'm Skaggs283, and I will see you guys in the next one.